In the pressurized and paranoid days of the Cold War, US intelligence agencies turned to psychic spies to get an edge on the Soviet Union. The protocol they developed for clairvoyant espionage was called remote viewing. This program was kept secret for a long time, but it's very much out in the open now. And these days, just like astrologers, there are a lot of remote viewers on YouTube. One of the channels I follow on YouTube is this one, that of the Future Forecasting Group, which is a, quote, rock star remote viewing team which carries out psychic investigations of various targets such as particular places, times, and people. And I found one of their recent remote viewing sessions very interesting for a few reasons, because they were tasked with viewing Klaus Schwab, who just retired as head of the World Economic Forum, and they got some pretty incredible results. Now, they published the video I'm talking about on May the 17th, and one of the remote viewers had this to say about Klaus.
Man, I don't think they're that happy with Klaus. I think Klaus is on his way out.
Yeah,
I think they're gonna
I got the same idea too.
And on May the 21st, Klaus announced his retirement. That's pretty weird. But for me, the most obviously mind-blowing thing that came out of this session was the picture that one of the viewers, Dick Allgeier, drew of the target. Yes, that's Klaus Schwab, all right. So if this is for real, that's a truly mind-blowing demonstration of clairvoyant ability. You can watch the whole video and see for yourself. I've linked it in the description below. So that's a demonstration of what remote viewing can seemingly do. In this episode, we'll see how some of the things that the Future Forecasting Group are saying about Klaus Schwab and the WEF tally in very interesting ways with things that astrology is telling us about the years to come. And we do an interesting experiment and look at how remote viewing and astrology might be used together to forecast the future, in particular by looking at the world events of this month, June 2024. So if all that sounds good, then please do join me, Dan Waits, as we head off on another journey into the past to understand the present and the future. If you're enjoying this video, then please do click that like button and let YouTube and me know that. And if you want to make sure to catch future videos, then click the subscribe button and enable notifications, and we'll never be apart again. If you really like this channel and want to support what I'm doing here, then I'd like to gently suggest you join my World Astrology Report members site. Should you decide to do so, I will offer you much of value in return. Because most of my videos, including this one, have an exclusive extended version in which we delve deeper into the subject matter and touch on areas that perhaps aren't so suitable for public consumption. For example, in the extended version of this very video, available to watch on my site right now, we're going to look at the fascinating astrological history of remote viewing. And we're going to see how the remote viewing research program and many other parapsychological programs were closely tied to the cycle of Saturn and Neptune. That's very relevant to our world of today because these planets are in the same sign of Pisces right now, and they're getting ready to make a fresh conjunction at 0 Aries, the first degree of the entire zodiac, in February 2026. So understanding this weird history will help us to better understand the nature of the times we're living through now and those we're about to head into. But that's not all. Members of the site will also get access to an exclusive forum, the War Room, hosting intelligent discussion of world astrology, history, and all the stuff we get into on this channel. And they will also get to participate in regular live streams. The next one is happening very soon. I'll be holding a Q&A for members on June the 14th, where you can ask me anything. So please do subscribe if you want to take part in that. To sign up, head to worldastrologyreport.com and you can start watching a bunch of exclusive content right away and start posting on the forum. So thanks for listening. Let's get back to the video with a journey into the past. At the start of the 1970s, the CIA launched a new and very unusual program of research, which was carried out through the Stanford Research Institute, today known as SRI International. Two physicists and parapsychology researchers, Harold Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ, joined SRI and began a program of research into the paranormal, in particular into clairvoyance, or extrasensory perception, ESP, as it's also known. And this research was funded by the CIA. The program's aim was to establish if people with psychic powers could be used to ascertain information about people and events that were far removed in distance and even time from where the psychics were physically located. In other words, this was a psychic spy program. And among the psychic subjects that Targ and Puthoff investigated were the famous Israeli spoonbender, Uri Geller, and Ingo Swann, an artist and psychic well known today for his book about remote viewing, Penetration. Incidentally, it was Ingo Swann who, in December 1971, came up with the name remote viewing. Now, Puthoff and Targ, being scientists, developed a protocol for carrying out clairvoyant investigation that was intended to give the procedure scientific rigor. The procedure they developed involved using a viewer, who was the person with the clairvoyant abilities, a monitor who ran the session and questioned the viewer on what they saw, and a target, which was the thing the viewer was attempting to perceive. And crucially, the procedure they developed was done in double-blind conditions. This meant that the viewer was not told what they were supposed to be looking at, and neither was the monitor. A third person would write the target down, and it would be placed in a sealed envelope in an adjacent room to where the remote viewing experiment took place. This meant that any information that the viewer came up with couldn't be contaminated with their preconceived ideas about the target, and the monitor couldn't inadvertently clue them in to what it was. This is what I think makes information that comes from remote viewers especially intriguing when it matches up with reality. But did it actually work? Well, Puthoff and Targ certainly thought so. An interesting example was cited by Puthoff in a paper he wrote. In August 1973, the NASA probe Pioneer 10 made a flyby of the planet Jupiter. And before that mission happened, Ingo Swann did a remote viewing of the planet. Swann apparently saw a ring around Jupiter, which made him think he'd screwed the viewing up and maybe looked at Saturn by mistake. But when the Pioneer 10 flyby actually happened later, it revealed that Jupiter did indeed have a ring. But now, let's return to the Future Forecasting Group, because they said some very interesting things about Klaus Schwab. As many of you will know, the World Economic Forum is a kind of talking shop for the world's elite movers and shakers. It was founded by Klaus Schwab himself as the European Management Symposium in 1971, and it grew from there. Today, it's best known for its annual gatherings at Davos, a luxury ski resort in Switzerland. And I probably don't need to tell you about how the WEF has really become a symbol of the merger of state and corporate power, of international technocracy and obsession with technology. Now, the Future Forecasting Group did a remote viewing of old Klaus that caught my interest, firstly because they seem to get an awful lot right about him, and secondly because their video contains some information that tallies with what I'm seeing astrologically in interesting ways. First of all, just to remind you, the viewing of Klaus Schwab was done blind, and the viewers gathered a lot of information that obviously tallies pretty well with who we know him to be. There was a lot of talk of him being very powerful, of him liking to be center stage. One of the viewers said he had CEO or president vibes. And for those of you who suspect he's up to no good, there were suggestions of him being deeply involved in manipulation. But one of the most interesting pieces of information for our purposes that the viewers gathered on Klaus Schwab is that he's into astrology.
I think this is astrological chart. I don't know, Edward could help. Edward, you had astrology in yours. He follows astrology. He avoids things based on charts.
If that's the case, then it suggests that Schwab, and probably the very powerful people he associates with, are well aware of the big cycles that have been beginning and ending around this time. Schwab is well known for his idea of the, quote, Great Reset, which he announced in June of 2020 in the early months of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Great Reset was his proposal to take advantage of the pandemic, to rebuild the global economy in a way that prioritized, quote, sustainable development and harnessed the advantages of what he has called the fourth industrial revolution, which essentially seems to mean hooking us all up to even more electronic devices and merging us with machines and AI and all that stuff. One of the viewers, Edward Reardon, wrote down a series of words about this target: replace, remodel, rebuild, reconstruct. As he says, he got everything except for the Great Reset itself. That's quite a hit. And it's interesting to consider that when Schwab talked of this Great Reset, he may have had the astrology of 2020 in mind. 2020 marked the beginning of the Age of Air, a time in which Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions will take place exclusively in air signs, as opposed to earth signs over the past 200 years. Another of the viewers, Daz Smith, said he felt something very dark and ominous around the target, and he singled out a particular time that he thought the target was thinking about.
Something feels bad, it's huge, it's ominous, global, dark, damaging, and it's an event situation. It's almost like I can feel the storm clouds from this gathering right now. It feels like a very sobering, very serious announcement, devoid of any emotion, from this person. So it's very scary, very impacting. It's future based, and it feels like this announcement is going to come in like 2025, late in 25 or early in 2026. And I did not like the feel of this at all when I was picking this up. So it feels like something bad, maybe even something to do with war or deceleration of war or something like that.
This is another of the parts that I found striking, because early 2026 is the time of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in the sign of Aries, which is the sign of Mars, the war planet. The conjunction is happening at 0 degrees of that sign. This is one of the so-called world points, 0 degrees of the 4 cardinal signs, and astrological events that take place in those places are said to have effects on the entire planet. There's something about a conjunction at the 1st degree of the zodiac that suggests the beginning of something, a great reset perhaps. So all this is very interesting in my opinion, but of course it doesn't prove anything about Klaus Schwab or what's coming down the line. And just because old Klaus has plans doesn't mean he can succeed in making them happen. So that might give you a hint of how remote viewing and astrology could be combined. But let's go further. Just like this channel, the Future Forecasting Group releases monthly forecasts. And I thought it might be interesting to see what intersections there are between their forecast for June and mine, and to see what an astrological perspective might add to what they saw and vice versa. I've added a link to the Future Forecasting Group's June forecast below. As with this channel, they reserve their full forecast for subscribers, but they present the highlights on YouTube. It's just over 13 minutes long, so you might want to pause this video right now and give it a watch. We won't go through everything they predict. I'm just going to look at some things that particularly caught my eye. Firstly, several of the viewers saw events happening near water, including damage to a bridge, an accident on or near a beach, and 2 military ships engaging with each other. In my forecast video for June, I talked about Saturn stationing retrograde in Pisces this month, and how this is likely to constitute a moment where Saturn's influence is emphasized. Saturn is, of course, one of the 2 malefic planets in traditional astrology, and Saturn stationing retrograde in Pisces can be read as trouble at sea. A bridge is also rather reminiscent of Saturn in Pisces. It's a structure over water. Another theme that came up from more than one of the viewers was, pretty ominously, the start of a big war.
I saw a plane falling and tumbling, and the idea that this is going to be pretext to war.
I just have the big, big words, first strike.
Needless to say, I hope they're wrong about this, but one of the more worrying possibilities around the Saturn-Neptune conjunction at 0 Aries is that it could signify events that have to do with conflict at a global scale, given that Aries is the sign of Mars and 0 Aries is a world point. And as I mentioned in my June forecast, I'm looking at Saturn and Neptune stationing retrograde around 10 degrees from each other this month as a signpost for what the conjunction of 2026 is signifying. And I said that I'd be watching Russia particularly closely. Let's hope that we don't see an expansion of the Ukraine war with Russia, perhaps with NATO somehow getting more directly involved. Another notable image came from this viewer, Naeem, who said he saw US Vice President Kamala Harris getting into some kind of controversy by saying something people don't like. If we look at Harris's natal chart, we see some interesting things. Firstly, Saturn is about to station retrograde in her 10th house, of public reputation on the 30th of June, but the retrograde will be active well before that. And Pluto is currently squaring her Mercury, which is the ruler of her ascendant and the planet of communication. On the 14th of June, Mercury will be Cazimi on her ascendant and North Node, which is a time I would certainly wonder about her being in the news for saying something notable. And finally, in some more hopeful news, 2 of the remote viewers saw scenes that suggest the possibility of a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. I haven't foreseen that myself, but that doesn't mean it won't happen. If Israel were to make a surprise announcement, then the Mercury Cazimi, which is flanked by unifying Venus and conjunct surprising Uranus in the Israel natal chart on June the 14th, might be a moment when it could happen. Or perhaps we could see it on June the 17th, when Mercury and Venus conjoin at 0 Cancer. Again, one of the world points, and very close to the natal Venus of the Israel chart. Mercury conjunct Venus could mean an announcement of peace. Now, all of this has been a little experimental. Let's see what happens, and pray in particular for peace. If you're watching this video and wondering what the Saturn-Neptune conjunction of 2026 could have in store for the world, then I recommend you watch this video, in which S.J. Anderson and I explored Saturn-Neptune conjunctions of the past and considered what could be coming in the future. Thanks, and see you next time.